Hey, what up, YouTube? Here with a post-fight video of the Jaime Munguia versus Sergiy Derevyanchenko fight. Now, before I give you guys the summary of what happened in the fight, I'm going to tell you the results first. Jaime Munguia was able to win this fight via unanimous decision. I personally had the fight score 115 to 112 in favor of Jaime Munguia. Now, this was for the WBC Silver Super Middleweight title. And I believe this was Jaime Munguia and Derevyanchenko. Pardon me, I'm trying to get the pronunciation of Derevyanchenko's name correct. And that's why I say bear with me for whoever's listening and watching this video, all right? Anyways, this was, I think, both of these fighters' first fight at super middleweight. As you know, Jaime Munguia and Derevyanchenko, they both had made their names at middleweight. And Jaime Munguia, he has improved his record to 42-0. He's still undefeated, still one of the best fighters among the middleweight division. And now he collects yet another belt at super middleweight. Now, I don't know for his next fight, Jaime Munguia I'm talking about, because he won this fight. I don't know if he's going to go back to competing at middleweight where he was building up his ranks, or if he's going to try and build his name as super middleweight. And Derevyanchenko, I would say, is probably his toughest test to date. And I would say this was definitely the toughest fight of Munguia's pro career, where he's still undefeated. A lot of people thought that Derevyanchenko should have walked away with the win, because if you guys saw the fight on the zone, the unofficial scorecards on the zone, it was 114 to 113 in favor of Derevyanchenko. And that's how a lot of people saw Derevyanchenko versus Triple G when they fought. That's how you know Derevyanchenko is a tough fighter for any fighter that tries to climb up amongst the top of the division. And how this fight went, the summary of this fight, it was arguably up there for a fight of the year potential for this year. And it was very competitive. It was back and forth. It was action-packed. It was a good pace fight. And as I said, I personally had the fight score 115 to 112 in favor of Munguia. And I'd like to hear your guys' opinion for those that saw the fight and how you guys had it scored. Jaime Munguia, he couldn't fight the fight that he usually likes to fight, and that is him adding the pressure and him bullying his opponents and him coming forward and fighting off of volume and fighting off of aggressiveness and his come forward style. In this fight, however, a lot of times he had to fight off the back foot and move laterally and had to use a lot of footwork for him to secure this win in this fight, because Derevyanchenko, he was punching back. The range was in his favor in this fight. He was able to find the range a lot more easier than Munguia did. Him being the shorter and smaller fighter, he had to close that gap, and Derevyanchenko did a great job at closing that gap versus the taller, lengthier opponent, Jaime Munguia. And Derevyanchenko, he was very accurate, very flush with his shots, while Jaime Munguia, he was looking like he was discomforted because of the fact that he couldn't pressure Derevyanchenko and force Derevyanchenko to fight off his back foot. Instead, it was Munguia that was getting backed up and having to make adjustments in this fight. And Munguia, he had his moments as well when the range would be fought at more of a comfortable range where he wanted the fight to be fought at. And he did a good job at being more accurate and landing the more flush, cleaner shots when it was at a longer distance at this fight, and not with the close gap distance where Derevyanchenko was having success at. And Derevyanchenko, he would also have his moments when he would have him backed up and trapped against the ropes and against the corner. And that's when Derevyanchenko would be able to land combinations and flurries of shots. However, in the later rounds, the final rounds, in the 12th round, Munguia, this definitely was a momentum changer for Jaime Munguia, because there was a lot of questions in the air with Jaime Munguia if he could have this fight won because of how close and competitive this fight was. And his corner was telling him as well that he would have to put more pressure onto Derevyanchenko because this fight was questionable and it was in the air. And Derevyanchenko, this was the fight that he wanted to avoid, how the fight was being fought at the 12th round, because Jaime Munguia, he fought the fight in the 12th round that he wanted the fight to be fought throughout the whole fight, and he would actually drop Derevyanchenko with a body shot. And being the shorter fighter, I'm talking about Derevyanchenko, Jaime Munguia, it's harder to find the target against the shorter opponent. However, that's what he should have been doing throughout majority of the fight, because that would have wore down and slowed the pace of Derevyanchenko and would have got him more fatigued for the latter rounds. And then that knockdown really helped out for Munguia, because the scorecards, it could have went either way. Two of the judges would have had the fight scored a draw if it wasn't for the knockdown. And it would have ended in a majority draw for both fighters, because one of the judges had it 115 to 112 for Jaime Munguia. And if two of the judges who had a score 114 to 113 for Jaime Munguia, it would have ended in a draw if it wasn't for the knockdown, because only one judge would have had selected a winner instead of the two other judges. Anyways, Jaime Munguia, as I said, this was the toughest test of his career, and he improves his record to impressive 42-0, and he collects yet another impressive win on his record, and this is a good look on his resume. And I think he's ready for another leap at a higher level of competition, and he's ready to challenge for a world title. The middleweight division doesn't have any unified champions at that division right now, and Jaime Munguia has been a household name at the middleweight division. And who can he challenge for the world title right now? The most marketable fight for Jaime Munguia to have, and Jaime Munguia's got quite the following behind him right now. And with that being said, him versus Jermall Charlo, the WBC middleweight champion, that would be the most marketable fight that the sport of boxing can make happen right now. As I said, Jermall Charlo, he's had a following behind him for a while now, as has Jaime Munguia. And as I said, that's why that's the most marketable fight that the middleweight division can produce right now. And Jaime Munguia, as I said, the fighting Derevyanchenko, this was the toughest challenge of his career, and I would say Derevyanchenko has been a tough opponent for any top contender at the middleweight division to take on. That's why I think with Jaime Munguia getting this victory, leaps him up to have him as a challenger that's top ranked, ready to challenge any of the champions at middleweight. Right now, there is, as I mentioned already, Jermall Charlo, and then there is, what's his name? The current WBO middleweight champion, undefeated. He's lesser known than Jermall Charlo. His name is Janibek Ali McConley. He's undefeated right now, and he's on the come up as well. And that would call for a good fight as well. And then there's Erislandy Lara, who is a veteran and who's got one of the most difficult styles in the sport of boxing. And he makes for a tough fight for any fighter at the middleweight division. And that's the current WBA middleweight champion. And I think Triple G vacated the IBF middleweight title when he went up to super middleweight to have that trilogy bout versus Canelo Alvarez last September. And I think Triple G vacated those titles, and I think he's on his way to retirement. Now, it says in the Ring Magazine middleweight rankings that Gennady Golovkin, Triple G, is the number one ranked middleweight right now, and he doesn't have a world title. And there's Murata as well, who was a former WBA middleweight champion. Now, if Munguia doesn't want to yet challenge for any of these middleweight titles, then that could be another good potential fight, and that would call for a good stylistic fight as well, because both fighters like to work off the front foot. Both fighters are come forward style fighters who like to throw a lot of punches and or pressure fighters and or aggressive style fighters. And that's if Jaime Munguia and his camp feels like he's not ready to challenge for a world title yet. I say why not, because the middleweight division has been slept on for a while now, and that's for a good reason, because none of the top-ranked fighters at middleweight wants to fight each other. As I said earlier, there hasn't been any unification title bouts amongst the middleweights ever since the Triple G versus Murata fight, and that was for the IBF and WBA middleweight titles. And now since Triple G vacated both the WBA and IBF middleweight titles, there hasn't been a unified middleweight champion. That's why I'd like to see if, as I said, Jaime Munguia doesn't challenge, which I think he's ready. He has enough experience. He has over 40 fights, and that is plentiful experience. That will make him a veteran in the sport of boxing, and that's why I say he definitely has enough experience, whole lot of experience for him to challenge for a world title. That resume of him having the record of 42-0, that's a championship level record right there. And that's more experience than the current WBO middleweight champion, who only has 14 fights. And there is Jermall Charlo, who also has lesser fights than Jaime Munguia. And as I said, and Erislandy Lara as well. And as I said, I don't know how the promotional issues is going to be with Jaime Munguia being promoted by Golden Boy, and he fights on the Zone Network. And I think the WBO middleweight champion, I'm going to have a hard time pronouncing this man's name. I pronounced it earlier. What's his name again? Ali McConley, and he is the current WBO middleweight champion. I think he's fought on the Zone before, so I think promotionally speaking, that would be more of a easier fight to make happen if Golden Boy and the team of Jaime Munguia wants to push Jaime Munguia to challenge for any of these world titles. And as I said, speaking for the middleweight division's sake, another title unification bout amongst the middleweights would be a good look. And I'm talking about a title unification bout between the WBC and WBA middleweight champions Erislandy Lara versus Jermall Charlo. Now, I don't know if Jermall Charlo and his team wants to make that fight happen, because Erislandy Lara, stylistically speaking, that is a fight that many fighters want to avoid because it is a risky fight. And Erislandy Lara, like many Cuban fighters, don't tend to draw as many fans for their fights. That's why it's not as much of a marketable fight for any top-level fighters to make. Now, Jermall Charlo, he has been questioned for not taking on as many challengers and as many top-ranked fighters as possible. Now, to clear the questions of that part when it comes to Jermall Charlo's criticism, that would be a good look on his part to either take on the challenge of Jaime Munguia or a title unification bout. Now, that's why I thought I would talk about how the middleweight scene is right now, because we're talking about the middleweights, and because Jaime Munguia and Derevyanchenko both are middleweight fighters, regardless of the fact that this was for a super middleweight title. Now, I don't know if Jaime Munguia, if I were in his corner, I would say, finish what you were started at the middleweights and go for any of these titles than to go chase after money, where Canelo Alvarez is the current undisputed super middleweight champion, and that's the cash cow of the sport right now. And to start all over again at super middleweight before becoming the champion at middleweight, where he was putting in all that work, I think it will make more sense for him to continue what he was building at middleweight than to go up at super middleweight and go through what he had to go through at the middleweights to try and become a undisputed champion at super middleweight. Anyways, y'all let me know what y'all opinions are from the fight that y'all saw with Jaime Munguia and Sergiy Derevyanchenko. Comment, subscribe, share, like, all that good stuff. And I'm out of here, y'all. Peace.